Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Namaskar. Friends, in the first segment of the Yoga Vasishtha, or the Garden of Yoga Vasishtha, we learned how the text Yoga Vasishtha enables us to live a more fulfilling and satisfying life. But we also learned that the text is about the dialogue between Sri Rama, a young Sri Rama, and the sage Vasishtha, who helps to clarify many of the doubts and questions that arise in the mind of Rama. But the text does not go straight into the dialogue of Rama and Vasishtha. It actually starts by showing that questions similar to those of Rama had arisen in the minds of others in other times and ages. It is an answer to those questions that sage Vasishtha's teaching is narrated here in the Garden of Yoga Vasishtha. The text actually begins with a question posed by Sutikshana, a person of awakened intelligence, and his question is to Rishi Agastya. Sutikshana has observed life, its pleasures and pains, joys and sorrows at close quarters, and is faced with a dilemma. He seeks liberation from the humdrum of repetitive life, where one is born and one dies, only to be born again without finding any meaning or rationale in the process. He says to Agastya, "Revered sir, is it through action and ritual performance or through knowledge that we gain liberation from this humdrum of the cycle of birth and death?" The Rishi says that like the two wings of a bird, both are needed to fly. We cannot rely just on one and say that we have enough knowledge and we do not act accordingly. Agastya, on his part, narrates the story of Karuna, a young scholar, learned in the Vedas and the Shastras. Karuna had stopped performing the daily rituals and other works and remained engaged in study only. When questioned by his father Agnivesha, he replied that as per his understanding, some of the Shastras state that liberation is gained not by karma or action, that it is gained by knowledge alone. While some emphasize action alone, he said that he felt confused as to which the true path was. The father in turn told him another story, the story of King Arishtanami, and he told him that after handing over his kingdom and his great wealth to his sons, King Arishtanami took to austerities on a sacred mountain. His penance was such as to even shake the kingdom of the gods, where Indra himself became fearful that Arishtanami may become more powerful than him. So we find even the gods are fearful of being subjugated by someone more powerful than them. And gods here refer to deities, which are forces or energies that rule particular elements. So we have the god of fire, the Agni Devata, the god of wind, Vayu, we have water, Varuna, etc. So Indra sent an attendant offering many gifts to the king who was doing his austerities and penance, and even offering him a place in his kingdom of heaven in return for stopping his rigorous penance. Arishtanami asked the attendant what it was that heaven offered. He said that it offered an abundance of objects of pleasure, and that beings there did not age, and that the senses and the organs of perception did not weaken. Arishtanami posed another question, to which the attendant answered that the good and bad tendencies that humans suffer on earth were equally and maybe even more intensely present in heaven. jealousy, hatred, ambition, personalized love, all those existed in an intensified form in heaven. Arishtanami told the messenger to go back with his offer that he did not want such an heaven. Indra was deeply impressed by Arishtanami, who was not attracted by the splendors of heaven, and asked the attendant to take him to Rishi Valmiki, who would instruct him about the true path to a good life and to liberation. And Arishtanami agreed to this request. Of course, Rishi Valmiki, on his part, was pleased to receive such a dedicated disciple, because teachers also wait for disciples with whom they may share their knowledge for the benefit of sentient beings. And the Rishi said to him that he would narrate to him the story of Rama. We don't have to remember all these names and chronology of all the actors presented to us in the text here. These are meant to show that the questions raised by Sutikshana is not new, that the question had troubled humankind since time immemorial, and even Sri Ram was subject to a similar dilemma. And the answer has a long-standing tradition of being traced back to a divine source. Valmiki said that he had earlier narrated the story of Rama to his dear disciple Bharadwaj, and this Bharadwaj in turn narrated it to Brahmaji, the creator. Brahma, the word Brahma with an elongated A sound at the end, is not the same as Brahman, that is the supreme consciousness or the supreme power. Brahma refers to the creator God. And pleased on hearing the story, Brahmaji granted a boon to Bharadwaj, saying that he could ask for anything he wished for. And Bharadwaj, being an evolved soul, wanted to know how living beings could be freed of sorrow and miseries in the world. And Brahmaji told him to go back to Valmiki and ask him to further the story of Rama and narrate the part which dealt with Rama's dilemma. Saying so, Brahmaji himself accompanied Bharadwaj to sage Valmiki and asked him to narrate the story of Rama and Guru Vasishtha for the welfare of all beings. And then Brahmaji disappeared. The Rishi Valmiki said to Arishtanami that he would narrate to him the story of Sri Rama and Sage Vasishtha in answer to his question regarding a good life and the path to it. Now, why did Brahmaji instruct Valmiki to narrate the teachings of Vasishtha to alleviate sorrow and misery from the world? Later we will find that it is Brahmaji himself who had initially given this knowledge to Sage Vasishtha. So there's a whole lineage through which the teaching comes down, from the divine through spiritually evolved sages to mankind in general. So it has a stamp of divine authority. This teaching has the stamp of divine authority. We also see that none of the teachers lays claim to the knowledge thus imparted. Rather, they refer to ones before them who had provided the answers. Here also we notice the different standpoints from which the questions arise. Sutikshana is a householder living a righteous day-to-day life, as many of us do. His question had arisen from his own reflection, after he had observed life and found it wanting. Karuna, on the other hand, was a learned scholar. His question arose from intellectual learning. Arishtanami, a king who had experienced all the pleasures of life, had renounced his kingdom to engage in deep meditation. He found that the answer to what he sought lay not in material allurements, but in a knowledge that would help him to get to the root of existence. Arishtanami was offered the bounties of heaven, which he rejected, as they were not going to solve his existential dilemma. So we find that when a question is raised from the depths of one's own being, from one's own experience, the answer too is received at that level, giving rise to a knowledge that is transformational. All the questioners here are highly evolved souls who have made deep reflections on the human condition. The teaching is about the nature of being, which is what needs to be contacted to live life fully. The invocatory verse salutes the one great Atman, the consciousness in which all beings appear, in which they are sustained, and into which they resolve. That Atman is what is sought to be discovered if we want to live a dynamic and meaningful life that is satisfying to the core. So we can read the invocatory verse, even when we don't know Sanskrit. It's all right, because it's nice to hear the cadence of the sound of the shlokas. The verse says, Yata sarvani bhutani pratibhanti stitani cha yatraivo pashyamam yanti tasyai satyatmane namaha yata jnanam tatha jneyam trishta darshana drishyabhu karta hetu kriya yasmat tasmai jnatatmane namaha. Here we come to another important discovery. We find that when the quest is sincere, the divine itself comes and directs our path. This was the case with King Arishtanami, whose unswerving determination made Indra, the king of heaven, guide him to Rishi Valmiki. And Bharadwaj was led to sage Valmiki by Brahmaji himself. In keeping with the Upanishadic tradition, the text is in the form of a dialogue between a ripe student and a teacher well established in the self. In this case, it is between Sri Rama and the sage Vasishtha. We too need to reflect deeply and come to this level of questioning. It is our sincerity and method of questioning that leads to answers that are transformative. Hari Om.